Hello, everyone. My name is Joel Ivany, and welcome to Against the Grain Theater's Lunch and Learn. Hopefully you have a delicious sandwich or soup with you for this series. We want to thank the Canada Arts Council for sponsoring this. We'll have about 5 or 6 guests over the coming weeks to talk about different ways that technology has played a role, especially as COVID has hit and we are a little more isolated and we're having to adapt and pivot in our technology and the way that we produce the arts.
We've been talking a lot about pivoting, right? Everybody's had to pivot. How do you deliver content that you used to deliver on a stage with, anywhere from 50 to 2,000 individuals sitting in the audience? How do you now deliver that and cut through the noise and just the chaos that is television and what we call OTT, over the top? So Netflix, Amazon Prime, CBC Gem, things like that.
More than ever, the space is crowded. It is noisier than ever with the options available to consume content. And so for what we're learning is that the message has to be clearer than ever before.
I mean, for arts organizations, I think one of the big things to understand about online audiences is that you never have that truly captive audience the way that you do in the theater, right? They're sitting there like that's the only thing they can watch. When they're at home watching online, they're very easily distracted.
So it really is, how do you engage? How do you make the experience greater than it normally would be just watching a television show? How do you do that?
The other thing we're really noticing is how much consumers are demanding greater transparency from brands in terms of how they govern their business and their brand overall. Consumers, including myself, we want to see how staff and collaborators and partners are valued and supported and even protected during this incredibly challenging time.
There's a saturation level that you reach when there's just so much out there that then you just don't want to watch anything at all.
Necessity is being the mother of invention. Now is the time to invent and be brave and be bold and make some choices that and just you see where they land, right?
We are all becoming content creators even before COVID, but now, my gosh, it's more than ever.
I think broadcasting, even in the word itself, broadcasting, it can really help organizations reach a much bigger audience that they might not have initially been able to capture based off of their geography or the size of community that they're in. It adds whole new levels of interactivity with that as well. If you've reached a larger audience and you're using technology and like Facebook Live or other live streaming technologies that lets people comment and kind of speak into the show that is happening, it really allows as well, depending on how you're doing it, allows your fans and the people that really want to champion what you're doing to share it more easily.
Right now, your audience isn't just the people who walk through your doors. Your audience really is anywhere you can reach them online.
You and I talk, we were talking about thinking outside the proscenium. Well, you guys have already done stuff like that, right? With your Opera Pub series, you're already outside that proscenium, and now more than ever, that has to be the way to think. There's a giant rethink that is required here now as producers are now, again, we use that term pivot, as they are pivoting to create content specifically for digital media, because you really have to think about, you can't just go about doing the same old play now and filming it, or the same old opera and filming it, because again, as we talked about, it's just the translation is not necessarily going to be there.
If you take away that sort of restriction of, okay, it has to be in a proscenium stage for this amount of time with, it has to fill this capacity of audience, you can really start thinking about different formats of creating content. Like what does episodic content look like for an arts organization? Being open to like a new level of creativity that wasn't really accessible or prioritized before.
The different levels of live versus recorded versus pre-recorded versus live stream, do you see a difference between the two?
Oh, absolutely. There are so many things that can go wrong when you are live, that generally speaking, unless you have like a broadcast size budget, it's probably better. And to be honest, you might get a better output product if you can just tape it and then go to post, edit it, and then put it together that way.
One of the biggest ones from the first months, and people have tried to find ways around it, if not overcome it, is what we call latency or delay in communicating with each other. So soloists can make sound in whatever space they can be in and record or live stream that. And there's issues about the technology of transmission of audio signals and listening to audio signals. We'll come back to that. But if there's more than one or two and you're trying to perform as an ensemble, there's a great challenge in doing that together without being in the same space physically.
If you're thinking about going live, you have to ask yourself, like, do we really need to go live? There's a guy in the industry that writes some stuff. He's a great contact. His name's Alex Lindsay. He's done this article on like, should you go live? And there's basically 4 reasons on why you would go live. I'm not going to get into all of them, but the last one is like a spectacle.
You know, something that the Royal Opera House did a few years ago, the opera machine, and they had a 17 camera setup. Now there were 17 stationary cameras, right? They didn't have 17 people running around with cameras on their shoulders or anything like that. But it allowed the audience to watch, I think it's Act 3 of De Valkyrie, and pick and choose at any point how they wanted to see, where they wanted to see from, including over the stage manager's shoulder, including in the pit with the musicians, of the conductor, from the wings. And it was just this, interactive, immersive experience that really was the cost of 17 GoPros and a very clever editor who was able to, time sync all of the film so that you could click through it and pick and choose. It's that augmented reality.
When we don't have the CBC behind us kind of being able to produce this for us, is there certain programs or technology that we can use to make this more possible and more of a reality?
For Mac, there's this piece of software called Mimo Live, which is this great little kind of a control room in an app a little bit that lets you bring in files and video sources and stuff like that. And then another one for Windows and for Mac that's great called OBS. It's called the Open Broadcaster software. It's great if you're trying to create a bit of an online immersive experience. It's very popular with esports, with like game streamers, and lots of great resources where you can kind of watch and learn about how to use that software.
Microphones are important, and my feeling is a stereo setup, something with more than one microphone, can help expand the sense of space when it gets to the other end, to the listener end. It can put the performer, in the space better. In order to give yourself a starting point to add acoustical character or sonic character, spatial character to a sound stream, you need to take away first the sound of where you recorded it in, your living room in this case, or your basement. And it's much, much easier to take away acoustic from a room, treat a room to reduce its sound than it is to make a room sound wonderful. So if you have a basement that's got a little bit of a boominess or an office or a bedroom, if you dampen that sound with simple things like quilts and curtains and the like, you can have a better starting point on which then to add or filter through the character you want to add later without carrying too much of the original through.
Of course, there's multiple free trainings out there that you can use to help figure out how well is my Facebook ad doing, what should I do next. And Facebook has its own training, Google Ads has its own training, LinkedIn as well. So all of those social media platforms have wonderful built-in training and reporting for you to help sort of adjust your marketing strategy in this time.
The IPA, which is the Independent Production Agreement, it's the kind of the big agreement. It's the 352-page agreement that, you know, gives you all the thou shalts and the thou shalt nots. And then the Web Indie Production Guideline, the WIP, is a 6-page addendum that allows smaller producers with smaller budgets the ability to produce content for the web, to be able to use it, monetize it for a 6-month period with no additional fees owing, other than the fee that you pay the performers on the day. And it really is an option for entry into, it's meant for new and emerging producers in that sphere, in the digital media sphere. And it's an entry point into, you know, making it all happen.
I know it's probably impossible to say, but what do you think the next 6 months to a year could look like?
I feel like it's going to just be more of that participative experience as much as possible in the virtual spaces. More of that, more of how do we make what would have been this personal in-person experience, but online. So companies finding out ways to make that easy.
I think people now more than ever are craving these moments of community. And you know, it's great to be able to see the piece or to see, you know, a production, a performance, but it's so much better when you can share that experience and talk about it and just interact with other people across the globe who might be watching, you know, the same thing you're watching.
Engagement is actually more important sometimes now than the content itself. I think people are, again, wanting to feel like they're a part of something and not just a robot watching.
We do know that the one place everyone is going to turn is going to be to the magic box that's in their house. Or even more so, you know, if you are my 18-year-old, this, right?
Yeah.
And this is going to be how you consume, you know, 90% of your content.
The future needs to be a combination. Live and digital need to work together. They need to complement each other. And that's just how it's going to be.
You know, when Netflix and Amazon have profits beyond anything they've ever dreamed of, it's because people need to feed their cultural soul and they can't go to a live event to do it. So they're going to the next source. And I think this next source is going to be with us for a little while, because I'm not sure that we're going to be able to do the gatherings again in any sort of meaningful way for the next foreseeable future. Right?
The broadest and most important piece of advice is, like, don't try to just recreate the status quo. Think about what you can use the screen for and what advantages it gives you.
The core of what you're doing should be, what is the story that is actually taking place? What is the narrative that we're trying to bring to the audience? And what is the most effective and simple way of doing that?